GH1 TV, your best experience.
It's another Thursday evening. Good evening and welcome to State of Affairs here on GHOne Television. I am Francis Aban. We are in a new month, so happy new month to all of you watching us tonight. We are in September, but September is coming with its own weight and bills and expenses for many homes. We're talking electricity and water tariffs going up. We're dealing with inflation going up. We're seeing food and beverage costs and the prices equally going up. So a lot of things are going up. I know what you say, Francis, my take home hasn't changed, but we all have to find a way to make things happen even in this moment. So tonight, we'll spend some time and talk about the health of our economy. We'll talk about what we're doing right, what we're not doing right, what best practice shows us, and what maybe history may guide on what we can do better now going forward. And then we'll also talk broadly about governance and what we can do in preparation for the next chapter. For this Fourth Republic, we've done 30 years. Now, upon reflection, for anyone who's growing, there must be some point where we say, we can now turn a new leaf and do things a lot more differently. What can we do differently? In protecting the public purse, in managing our public debts, in cutting out the wastages and how we spend money as a country. Tonight, it will be a bigger conversation about Ghana and its health and what we can do a lot more better. And who better to join us for this conversation than Mona Korte, the former Deputy Finance Minister and the Managing Partner of the BVM Advisory Services. She's my guest tonight for a special one-on-one interview here on State of Affairs. So you made that right choice on joining us here on the show. It will be worth your while, I can promise you that. This show is brought to you with the kind of association with MTN. MTN is everywhere you go, and Cowboy Coffee. If you need to make an urgent call but you realize you don't have credits at the moment, or your very important conversation was cut short because you run out of airtime, well, there's no need for all that stress, because on all you have to do on MTN is dial *506#, and then you get to borrow credits on MTN Extra Time. The best part is that you can also borrow data by dialing the same number, *506#, and then you can bundle data whenever you run out to continue browsing. As always, your conversation don't need to end. You can borrow some extra time and enjoy the things you love on your favorite network, MTN. Also, for you parents watching us tonight, I know you love your children very much, but why do you think milk is important in their meals every day, especially for the adults and children above the age of 6? Well, milk provides essential nutrients that enhance healthy growth. Carbohydrate milk is fortified with a unique blend of essential vitamins called Vita-Rich. Vita-Rich are vitamins that are essential for good eyesight development, fighting infections, building strong bones and teeth, and B9 for brain development. So help your loved ones support their growth with Carbohydrate milk, which contains Vita-Rich in their meals. Carbohydrate is also available in 5 delicious flavors and available in a shop near you. Carbohydrate is definitely our milk. So as I said, our special guest tonight is Mona Korte, the former Deputy Finance Minister and the Managing Partner for BVM Advisory Services. Always a pleasure. Good evening and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Francis. Good evening to you and to your viewers.
Okay. Before we talk about the heady matters of this country and our finances and the economy, I just want to find out, for many politicians, when the spotlight is not on you at the minute, you recall into your private life. What's that like now for you? 6 years since you left the portfolio of being Deputy Finance Minister. What's life been like for you?
Well, life has been good to a large extent. We've been under grace, and we've had time to look on and to reflect and to comment. Because whether you are in government or out of government, it is still about our beloved nation, Ghana. We still live in it. We've made investments in our country. Our families live here. So you still care about the nation, and you still comment on issues that are going on. Sometimes just a passing comment, sometimes a bit more passionately. And there are even times when you may also even give some advice here and there. But I think that once you go into politics, whether because you like to do party politics or whether you just want to contribute your expertise, it's for life. There's no going back.
Yeah.
So in or out, you still have the nation's interest at heart at all times, and you make your voice heard.
Yes.
Especially for we women.
And we'll come to that tonight.
We do not recoil into our shell at all.
That's
No.
good. That's good to hear. Okay, so I guess we can dig straight into the matters of the economy today. We're in a new month, September.
That's right.
PRC announced last month that the tariffs are going up. We're looking at well over 27% for electricity, 21% for water. That alone has a toll on business and on family budgets. Do you think as a country, per the current state of the economy, all these increases that we're seeing for inflation, for tariffs, are being properly managed?
So, Francis, everything starts from somewhere. There's been the issue in Ghana has always been that we have an economy that has a problem with its structure, its fundamental structure. We've always said we're an agrarian economy and so forth, but the world has moved on, and we need to take that agrarian economy to the next level. And this is one of the things that we were pushing very strongly before we left office at the end of 2016, agribusiness, because it's about the GDP, it's about the growth of the nation, how much more we are producing. So if you don't produce so that you can make the revenue, so that you can spend to grow the nation, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's services, to make the nation a place that becomes an enabling environment to do business, then surely you're going to have problems like the ones that we are having now. So yes, we've heard about utility prices having to go up. I guess those are going up to reflect cost. But the big question is, for we, the users, do we have an increase also in our purchasing power? And the answer is no, we don't. Now, what has brought us to this point? I would take three main things. One is the fact that right now inflation is galloping, as it were. We are looking at 31.7, almost 32%
Yes.
in rate of inflation.
That was as of end July.
End
the
of
numbers for
July.
August are not in as yet, of
Yes,
course.
and that was nothing that no one was expecting that. I mean, Bank of Ghana, top of their target range was, I think, 6.1% or so for the same period. So for us to be almost at 32, that is crazy. On top of that, we now have a depreciating cedi. It's not the first time, but this time the rate at which it's depreciated has just been alarming. I mean, if I even just think from March to now, to August, the depreciation rate is just too much, So we now have a currency whose value is low, but our salaries are the same. Therefore, any increase in our expenditure without a commensurate increase in our income means our cost of living is going up, but our standard of living is going down, which is really tough for us. I think the CPI as at now is about 173,
Yes.
and that you compare to 100, which is a base. So over the last maybe 10 or 15 years, that is how much we've come up from 100, 73 points more. That means that this is a very expensive country. So one is inflation, two is the depreciation of our cedi. And why is our cedi depreciating? It's because our demand for the US dollar or for foreign currency far outweighs the supply of it. Where does the supply come from? It comes from our exports. We are not exporting enough. We are importing much more. In fact, the petroleum products that we use in this country are imported.
Yes.
And therefore, there is pressure on the US dollar that we have in this country. Therefore, knowing this, you would expect that the managers of the economy would have everything in place to take care of these. These are not new problems. And in 2016, what we heard was that competent managers were coming to tackle these very problems. Yet 6 years down the line, these two problems have not been tackled. In fact, the third problem, which is plaguing us seriously now, is the debt burden. It's now 82%. Public debt is now 82% of our GDP. Of course, the GDP growth rate has not been that great. We thought that by 2024, we'll have a really great growth rate. It hasn't really happened because we haven't found any extraordinary thing. I mean, if you recall, in the 2000s, we found oil. That was a nascent industry, but it came on board and it gave us a rapid growth rate. Then the growth rate was not as much. But the idea was that let's go into agribusiness. Let's come out with new products so we can grow our GDP. So that hasn't happened. Our debt burden has gone up. Half of our revenue goes into servicing debt. That also puts pressure on the US dollars that we get, or the foreign exchange that
we get in a minute.
So it's a cyclical issue in terms of inflation being affected by costs and so forth, because most of what we use is imported, pressure on the cedi, devaluing it, and our debt burden going up. With our debt burden, and I think people have heard me say this several times, there's nothing wrong with borrowing per se. It is what you do with it to get a return. Over the last 6 years, we've had a massive borrowing, but there are no assets to go with that liability. There are a few that were finished projects. There are a few that were talked about, touted very strongly, but we still haven't seen the assets to go with that. So therefore, we are not getting any return. So those debt levels are not going down. They are being serviced. They are a lot, and mainly taken from the Eurobond market, and therefore it is even difficult to restructure. So as much as we would like to talk about restructuring, that's going to be only for the little that was taken from either a private creditor or some bilateral or multilateral loan. But otherwise it's going to be very difficult to restructure.
Now, I look at, and for all these things you've mentioned, we will have to look at them maybe per component, so we see what the options are.
Correct.
But first of all, there was talk in the last 2-3 months about us going for an IMF program.
Yes.
Where that will help us in looking again at our finances. And the government had made it clear to us that part of the reason why we are at this point of rock bottom was partly due to COVID-19 and its shocks and recovery. Also, the Russia-Ukraine war having an impact on the markets globally, and even the government's ability to be able to find short-term options in dealing with the shocks that are coming up. Do you find these to be the principal reasons for which we are where we are, or there are self-inflicted decisions that we've taken that have led us to this point?
Okay, so before we come to the IMF thing, which is supposed to be part of the solution, let's talk about the difficulties. So yes, there was the pandemic.
Yes, COVID-19.
Which is now an endemic. Yes, there was some war, Russia and Ukraine issue, which is still ongoing. So we were not the only ones impacted by that. Yet, our situation is different from every other country. Every other country has had some shock, but we seem to have been hit harder by some of these shocks and others because we were not as strong as we were touted to be. If you recall, in 2017, the numbers were wonderful because we had come out of an IMF program which was largely successful.
We actually
to a large
extended
extent.
and completed in 2019.
Yes, but because of the measures that had been taken and worked on from that time, 2017 seemed okay. Part of 2018, then it started to go down before the pandemic stepped in. The numbers were beginning to show some roughness already. So the managers of the economy were not managing the economy. They were harvesting what they had not sown. And then when it was time for work, all they did was to borrow, and not turn that borrowing into assets so that we could use it to grow the nation. And therefore, aside from the pandemic and aside from the Ukraine-Russian war, we had major issues. And that's why we've been affected much more than our neighbors. I mean, today, the cedi is the second worst performing currency after the Sri Lankan rupee.
Yes.
It's not happening to the Francophone countries. One would argue that they are linked to the French central bank, and so it's not happening for Nigeria, it's not happening for Sierra Leone, who is smaller than us. But we are taking the hit hardest because we had a situation where we were not managing our finances properly. One, I think you alluded to it, fiscal indiscipline. Our expenditure had spiraled out. We kept on putting numbers below the line when they obviously should have been above the line in terms of accounting. And we kept doing that, and expenditure just went out of the roof. Now, one would have expected that that kind of expenditure would even trickle into the economy and boost the economy to a large extent. But it didn't. So we wonder where that expenditure was going to.
So take for instance, there was talk of
clearly it was going to consumption.
Planting for food and jobs. There were a number of interventions. One district, one warehouse, all mentioned as interventions that will seek to bolster the economy. Education being a long-term investment, but for the ones on planting for food and jobs, for one district, one warehouse to augment what will be harvested into agribusiness and agro-processing, that was supposed to bring us some base.
Yes.
And also help us in ensuring the economy.
That's
so
right.
it's road infrastructure that the government says they had invested some money into.
Yeah. And
Which
talk
will
about
claw back
year
some
of the
returns.
road.
Yes.
Now, all that you've said was said, but we didn't see any reality on the ground. In terms of free SHS, we know where the funds came from. That did not come directly from the revenue. Yeah, it came from the petroleum funds, which it shouldn't have, but it did. Now, no one is saying that senior high school tuition parents shouldn't get help for it. We had always talked about a progressively free SHS tuition. So it was to work towards that. You are not yet strong enough to handle that. And now that flagship manifesto promise is failing. The kids are having problems in school. There's not much feeding, textbooks. It's just failing. And already a lot of money has gone into it. With the other programs you talked about that should have come from the budget, what's happening to them? They are not that visible. How many warehouses have been built in which districts? It's not that visible. How many hospitals have we seen built out of the Project 111? Not visible. How many more school buildings? We haven't seen that. I can't even think of an additional university that has come online since the ones that we left behind. So to be honest with you, they've all been just propaganda, just slogan. No assets to show for the liability that has come. Now, for the revenue that comes in, as I said earlier, a lot goes into debt servicing, in fact, almost half. The other goes into paying wages and salaries for the public service. And what is left is very little, and we end up with a serious deficit. At this point in time, because we are not even exporting enough to bring in extra revenue, our international reserves have gone down. And it is true that government has used part of that to shore up the city. But why are you shoring up something that cannot stand even on its own? Because we are importing too much and we are not making any effort to try and export more to balance it out or to generate from the country.
And do import substitution.
Not exactly import substitution, but for example, in the area of food, you don't need to import substitute. Apart from rice, which sometimes it makes sense to bring in than to grow here because it's cheaper globally. But the foods like onions, tomatoes, plantain, my God, Francis, when did those become, imported items? Those are our local staples. They surely cannot. I mean, corn. We've always had to augment by bringing it in. This is something that we should be growing on a commercial basis here and processing. So if we even talk about warehouses, where are those warehouses? There have been talks about silos and increasing them, but all that has not happened. So nothing has translated from the plan, which sounded good and made Ghanaians vote for this government, into reality, where Ghanaians can feel that we have the infrastructure and it is translating into our purchasing power and our income is. Even if it was the same, the value would be higher. But in this case, because the cedi is devaluing, our income purchasing power is also devaluing. So it has not worked out for Ghanaians. Unfortunately, the last 6 years has been tough for almost every Ghanaian.
Okay, there's a point where I'll go for our very first break. But when we come back from the break, we'll talk about the actions that must be taken. Because often when we talk about the problem in its entirety, yes, the prognosis is good, but what do we do beyond talking about the problem? What can we do to get out of the situation? Because when it bites, it doesn't bite only one side of the house. Everyone gets affected. So what do we do going forward? What ways do we start cutting back on? Should there be a change in personnel on who runs the economy? We will look at all these options and also about how we protect the public purse. Then to the bigger matters of governance. We will look at that tonight here on the show. Our guest tonight is Madam Mona Kote, the former Deputy Finance Minister, Managing Partner for BVM Advisory Services. This show is brought to you with the kinds of association with MTN and Carbon Coffee. If you need to make an urgent call but realize you don't have credits, or your very important conversation was cut short because you ran out of their time, well, there's no need for all that stress, because on all you have to do on MTN is dial *506# and then you get to borrow credits on MTN Extra Time. The best part is that you can also borrow data by dialing the same number *506# and then you can bundle data whenever you run out to continue browsing. As always, your conversation don't need to end. Borrow extra time now and enjoy the things you love on your favorite network, MTN. And also, to take care of your breakfast needs, you do need some Carbon Coffee and Carbon Milk in your life. Quick break. When we return, we'll talk about what we do to get out of the situation we are in now with the health of our economy, what actions we must take, what changes we must make to make progress. Stay with us. You're watching State of Affairs.
Glory to God. My name is the Reverend Dr. Lawrence Tete. Please don't wait until something happens before you get to say something. Our neighboring countries have been invaded by terrorists, and we believe they are closer to us like never before. Please be vigilant, be smart, and call 999 if you suspect anything in your area that does not make sense. And that is the only way we can safeguard Ghana. It is a collective responsibility. Say something when you see something, and be bold.
Say something if you see something, my friend. If you see something, you for say something.
Water is life. Water gives life. Water moves through nature in a never-ending cycle. Observe the beauty of water as it flows all around us, refreshing and restoring. Gaze in wonder at the stillness and beauty of nature. There's harmony in nature everywhere around. Water revitalizes the body and keeps you going strong. Water is life. Water gives life. Drink Awake Purified Drinking Water, one for life. So relax and unwind, and in the calmness of nature, find the rest you desire. For every bottle of Awake you buy, an amount to be donated to the National Cardiothoracic Center. This advert is FDA approved.
Carbon has 5 flavors: banana, strawberry, chocolate, coconut. What's the 5th one?
Banana.
Banana?
Okay, Dad. Including mocha, Carbon has 5 flavors: banana, strawberry, chocolate, and coconut. What is the 5th one?
Strawberry.
No.
Are you feeling hot?
Honey, including mocha, Carbon has 5 flavors: strawberry, banana, chocolate, coconut. What's the 5th one?
Chocolate.
Hey!
Coconut.
Hey!
Nutritious and refreshing, Cowbell has a flavor for everyone.
They think I don't know.
This advert is FDA approved.
Thanks for staying with us. You're watching State of Affairs here on GH1 Television. I am Francis Aban. Tonight we're talking about the Ghanaian economy, where we are at now in this new month and all the things that are going up. When I say things going up, I mean price of things going up and the economy in a very, very bad place, and what really we can do to get out of this. And also, while at that, protecting the public purse. But the show is brought to you with the kind of association with MTN. MTN is everywhere you go. As I keep reminding you, if you need to make an urgent call but realize that you don't have credit, or your very important conversation should not end because you've run out of airtime, there's an option for you. By dialing *506#, you get to borrow credit on MTN Extra Time. The best part is that you can also borrow data by dialing the same number, *506#, and then you can bundle data whenever you run out to continue browsing. As always, your conversation don't need to end. You can borrow some extra time and enjoy the things you love on your favorite network, MTN. MTN is everywhere you go. Okay, so the options for how we get out of this situation. I was just looking at the numbers this evening. It turns out that for our public debt, which at the last count was about $55.1 billion, about $28.3 billion was owed to external parties.
Correct.
And of the external debt, about 57% was owed to commercial creditors, predominantly in Eurobonds, as you had earlier mentioned.
Correct.
Now, even for the local bonds that are held, it has led to the downgrading of some of the banks because they're holding these bonds.
That's right.
How do we fix both ends of the stick? First of all, the debt that's skyrocketing, and then its impact on our banks and our banking system locally.
Well, in order to solve a problem properly, you must analyze it so that you can find the core issue and be able to deal with it. So, like you rightly said, the debt burden and the way the debt is structured is really hurting us. More than half of it is to commercial providers or creditors. And they have shut the door to us now because we are not credit worthy. We've been reduced to junk status. I mean, Fitch brought us down to CCC as a nation. So that is where we've been reduced to, and that has impacted the banks that you refer to, commercial banks within our nation who are holding a lot of these instruments or who have a lot of exposure to government, and therefore they cannot maintain better credit rating. They've also been reduced, and therefore their credit lines are reduced. So can you imagine what that means for imports, letters of credit and so forth? They won't be able to handle as much as they used to. So they are suffering on that. In the short to medium term, with this sort of situation where the doors are shut to us, to the Eurobond markets and so forth, we have a major problem to deal with. It's a serious problem that we have to deal with. We cannot get funds to continue any projects that we have on the ground or continue building infrastructure if we were even going to do any. The funds are just not there, and rather we have debt servicing. So one, considering where we are and considering that we just have a 3 or 4 months import cover depending on our international reserve, but we only have about 3 or 4 months import cover, then you know we are in dire straits. In fact, the numbers that government has shown us as being the numbers that we have for import cover, which is about 3 months, I know that the Finance Committee in Parliament don't believe that that is the number. They believe it's far less than that. So the picture has not even been painted properly to us. It may most likely be worse than we even think. Therefore, our situation is such that, Francis, you and I cannot sit here and try and generate solutions. Okay, we have paid people and we continue to pay people and give them all sort of perks, and people who said they could solve problems for this nation, economic problems, to do so, and we will hold them to doing that at this point in time. Now, we've seen the government start to consider IMF. They've invited them. That is a solution in itself. It does give you some credibility to be able to go back to the market to borrow. Now, to get that credibility, honestly, whether IMF comes or not, there are certain things you must do because you created some of those problems yourself. Fiscal indiscipline, crowding out your fiscal space with expenditure that is not generating revenue or even bringing in future revenue so that you can borrow against future revenues. That is not even happening. So there's been that fiscal indiscipline. Right now, our economy is destabilized, as it were. Our current account deficits, our budget deficits, I mean, we are in dire straits. So at this point, we have no option but to go to the IMF, which is what this government has done. There are things that, as a nation and as a government, or people who manage this economy, will have to do. We call them conditions. They will have to undertake those preconditions before the IMF will come and lend. Now, if they are looking at this enhanced development program, which is a 3-year fast-track program to stabilize the macroeconomy, and looking at a potential $1.5 billion being injected into the economy, then we've been given a list of things that we need to do.
Like what?
So if you recall, even when we had our program, we were asked to reduce our public service. We were asked to use only the GIFMI system, the Ghana Integrated Financial Management Information System, so that your expenditure is tracked and you are able to keep within your budget. That hasn't happened. It started to happen when we went into the program. It happened all the way into 2017, and then it went haywire. And now we are seeing expenditure spiraling out, and unfortunately what we borrow to do, purpose intended, we don't. We become like the ordinary, let me say, businessman who does not use the loan for the purpose intended. And the banks have found us out, because if we had used them for the purposes, for the roads that we said, for the further port expansion, for all the development needs of this nation, we would have seen the returns, and then would have been able to service our debt easily. But unfortunately, we have not been able to do that, to the extent that we have even borrowed domestically heavily, that we've pushed the interest rates up. The monetary policy is now such that they are fighting inflation, they are fighting CD depreciation, and as a result, we saw the policy rate go up by 300 basis points in one go. That is an extreme measure to hit inflation and to curb the CD depreciation continuing. This tells you that if the central bank is applying these policies, which otherwise should work, but the fiscal is dominating, and the fiscal is so unstable and not disciplined, then those measures will not even work.
Wow.
So to answer your question directly, until we have fiscal discipline, even the IMF program is going to be a problem. There is no solution that will work. I mean, I can sit here and give you all sorts of solutions, which I may have picked from my 2 years in office or from when I worked with corporates, which worked, but it won't work because the fiscal indiscipline continues. I mean, at this point in time, our debt to GDP ratio is well above the ECOWAS convergence rate, which is supposed to be 70%. So we don't even fit into that. By the time I was leaving office, it used to be that we were close to the convergence criteria to create that ECOWAS monetary union. Today, we are not. We are far from it. We've just eroded all the gains that were made by pure fiscal indiscipline. And the fiscal is dominating the economy and not allowing the monetary to do its part to make standard of living a good one. So, for example, let us take the fact that, if you remember, we had the Financial Public Act, that Public Financial Management Act, which said that we could not borrow from the central bank as, let me say, the economy of the country could not borrow from the central bank more than 10% of GDP. So in our time, we actually went into zero financing from the central bank, complete zero financing, and yet we're able to turn things around. Since then, we have seen this government borrow in excess of 10% of GDP from the central bank.
And that should come with consequences, isn't it?
It comes with consequences, which is the fiscal indiscipline that we are seeing. We are seeing expenditure going out of whack. Now, in terms of revenue, I mean, if you spend, bring the revenue in so that you can net off.
Yes.
The revenue too has not come in. As of today, I think we haven't been able to even collect up to 48% of what we said we'll be able to collect. So revenue is just not coming in because the compliance is not good enough. Number one, the compliance is not good enough. Number two, we are overtaxing the people and making them fed up and finding other ways of doing business or of transacting within the nation rather than joyfully step up and pay taxes. I mean, taxes is something no one really wants to do. But when people understand that their taxes will translate into a better standard of living, then they don't mind paying. Right now, the consumption tax, which is tax that is put on everything for everyone, VAT, the levies and all that, is just hitting each person in this country so hard that you're paying more than 50% of your salary or wages to taxes. And yet, the revenue is not coming in. So there are leakages. Basically, we are fetching water with a basket. This nation is fetching water with a basket, and therefore we are not getting the revenue that we need. And this is the work of the managers of the economy. All of a sudden, they've gone quiet. Yes, there isn't much said by them as to solutions and how they are trying to resolve it. Everybody is now banking on the IMF. But the IMF will require that you do some self-introspection and you make some changes with respect to your expenditure. I know there's been mention in the 2022 budget about cutting some expenditure. Have we been told exactly where those cuts are going to be and what the implications will be? No, we haven't been told that. We just continue to see a government that wants to go and borrow and not do what they'll do. This year was supposed to be the year of roads. That was how it was touted. How many new roads have we seen, really? New roads that will bring food from the farm gates. There's not been much addition. It's the same projects that we started that are being completed, haven't been completed. Contractors are not being paid. That's another major area. Money is not trickling into the economy. Contractors are not being paid. Where is all this borrowing going to? Where are those monies? You know, it begs so many questions. And at this point, we as citizens, we really feel that this economy is not being managed properly. The finance minister is not doing a good job. The head of the economic management team, Dr. Bawumia, is also not doing a good job, and in fact has gone fairly silent for some time now. But he's not doing a good job in terms of giving up from whatever experience he's had and so forth, and all that was said about having the men, having the knowledge and so forth. It's not reflecting in the way that the economy is being managed. So we are back to the IMF, but the big question is, are we ready to do the things that we must do in order to benefit from the IMF program? That $1.5 billion will help. The $750 million or so that came from AfriExim should help if it goes to the projects that were listed. But from what we know, this government has lost credibility. Anytime there's a list of projects, we never see them implemented. We see a lot of fanfare around it, but we don't see it implemented. And therefore, we are not benefiting from these projects.
So for the managers of the economy, per the analysis you've done tonight, it's evident they are not working. No. There's been talk, and I've heard a lot of people make requests that the one who's in charge of our finance and protecting our public purse should be changed. That call has come with a response from the president that his men are doing an outstanding job. Where does that leave us then?
It leaves us in a precarious position where we continue to have incompetent people running our economy and thus our nation, because we are a developing country and whoever runs the economy de facto runs the nation, as it were, because they decide where resources will go. And if the way they decide where resources will go is basically wrong, let me put it that way, then we are not going to get any good results. Again, if they decide that when people do things that are not right in terms of procurement, we saw what happened in public procurement agency, when people do wrong in many other sectors, those wrongs are not made right, and those laws that should be enforced are not enforced, then it means that we are not going anywhere except backwards. And it's a slippery slope down. So this is a precarious situation, and even the IMF will not be in a hurry to throw their 1.5 billion into this nation. We've been to them 16 times. We are entitled to go. We are a member nation.
Yes.
They must help us if we are in trouble. But are we recalcitrant trouble people? Are we patients who want to be healed but yet continue to live the lifestyle that makes us sick? Then it's useless. Which doctor wants to deal with you? So we as a nation, and especially the managers of our economy who've gone silent on us now, have to put in the policies to make the change.
Now, we're having this conversation at a time when today the Ghana Statistical Service came out with a report indicating that this year alone, well over 800,000 Ghanaians have lost their jobs. And that has come with this impact on food, people's ability to even feed, and food insecurity also going up. So at the start of the year from last year, food insecurity stood at about 49%. Now it's at 42%. But for the 42 that are in that bracket, the depth of their insecurity is deeper than what we saw earlier. Now, on that scale alone, and for the unemployment impact, now you've made it clear we don't have money to be able to recruit. The economy is not in a good place. So where do we go?
So, Francis, I'm glad you brought this up because it feeds into the inflation story.
Yes.
So, usually one would say that, look, raising the prime rate to take care of inflation, you are not allowing the economy to grow, because it's when the economy is growing and it's heated up that sometimes you see inflation going up, because people have money, right, to chase few goods. In our nation today, our inflation is almost at 32%. Do you see lots of money chasing few goods? No. So there's something wrong. That means we've even changed that whole situation. What is creating the inflation is that in order for us to continue to enjoy the imported goods, which has now become the bulk of what we consume, we need more dollars, and there's pressure on the dollar, and then there's the depreciation of the cedi. So that is, in fact, what is creating this inflationary situation. It's not because people have money. Like you rightly said, many people are unemployed. So it is not a lot of money that is chasing few goods, but it's this pressure on imported goods. We need to sit down and go through this list of imported goods. What is this thing that we are importing that we are not able to export enough to take care of it, to at least give us a net small position, but rather we have this big deficit? So those are some of the analysis that need to be done. We need to sit down and start looking at the areas that are creating problem. But we have budgets that are brought to Parliament filled with all sorts of scripture which don't tackle the core issues so that we can resolve them. But we keep trying to just play down the symptoms of the issue. And once we don't tackle the core issue, we have a major problem. And the core issue is that we are not producing enough. This nation has no business having unemployed people. There is too much work to do for people to be unemployed. If we were all working and we were all producing, wouldn't our GDP go up? If we were all working and producing, won't we be exporting? But clearly, there's a problem there. We have the people. In terms of the youth, we have a fairly educated and skilled population, and we can train some more through COVET, TVET. I mean, we have all these programs. We are not utilizing them, and therefore we are not getting labor force that can generate the revenue that this nation needs, either through exports or through taxes. And therefore we are where we are. That needs to change.
One last point before we go for a break. The president now talks, when he met the National Union of Ghana students this week, about the idea of a broader stakeholder consultation towards a review of the free senior high school policy.
But at the same time, I just saw, I think this evening, that there will be no change to the free SHS policy. So in one breath, you talk about a broader conversation, but you have already predetermined that you will not change it anyway. And you've got it into so many parents' head that it's free SHS, and they think it helps, but in actual fact we are finding out that it's even more expensive in the long term because the quality of education is not the same. They are not able to feed the children properly. It's costing parents more to keep their children in boarding schools because they all want their children to have boarding school experience, but it has now become more expensive, plus they are not getting the quality of education that they should get. What kind of labor force will we have in the next 10 years? That's a big question mark. And yet we need to produce to grow the nation. So these statements by the current government have far-reaching implication, and we wish that they would rather grab the bull by the horn and tackle it, because to be honest with you, Francis, whoever comes into power 2024, inshallah it will be the NDC, or 2025 January, is coming to work very hard to clean up and to make this nation get back on its feet again. It's going to be a Herculean task. We've done it before, we can do it again, but we don't need to see our nation go down this path before we recover. Otherwise, it's always like 2 steps forward and then so many steps back, which is a pity.
Okay, I have to go for another break now, but you're watching State of Affairs here on GHOne Television. My guest tonight, Mona Korte, former Deputy Finance Minister, sharing her thoughts with us on the economy today, the health of our economy, and the hard decisions that we ought to take going forward. If you're a parent watching us tonight, milk is important in the family's meal, especially for adults and children above 6. Now, because milk provides essential nutrients that enhance healthy growth, Carbol milk is fortified with a unique blend of essential vitamins called Vitarich. Now, the vitamins in Vitarich are essential for good eyesight development, fighting infections, building strong bones and teeth, and B9 for brain development. So help your loved ones support their growth with Carbol milk, which contains Vitarich in their meals. Carbol is also available in 5 delicious flavors and available in a shop near you. Carbol is definitely our milk. After the break, we'll do 2 things. How do we protect the public purse, the wastage? And the last point will be on the reorganization for the NDC. As you may have heard Madam Mona Korte mention, they're looking to come into power in 2024. But how ready are they and how prepared are they to be able to make that step? We will look into that tonight after the break. Stay with us.
Water is life. Water gives life. Water moves through nature in a never-ending cycle. Observe the beauty of water as it flows all around us, refreshing and restoring. Gaze in wonder at the stillness and beauty of nature. There's harmony in nature everywhere around. Water revitalizes the body and keeps you going strong. Water is life. Water gives life. Drink Awake Purified Drinking Water. One for life. So relax and unwind, and in the calmness of nature, find the rest you desire. For every bottle of Awake you buy, an amount to be donated to the National Cardiothoracic Center. This advert is FDA approved.
Ways to get around, but there's only one way to pay.
Momo? Sure.
So many styles to choose, but there's only one sure way to pay.
Momo?
Yes. There's so many you can buy, but there's only one sure way to pay.
Momo?
Yes.
Fish that to share my enemy.
There's so much variety, but there's only one sure way to pay. There's so many ways to get together, but there's only one sure way to pay. Got a payment to make? Use MTN Momo and enjoy real convenience in all your financial transactions. Live life the brighter way with MTN Momo. Just Momo it.
MTN.
Dad, including mocha, Carbol has 5 malt, coconut. What's the fifth one?
Banana.
Banana?
Okay, Dad. Including mocha, Cowbell has 5 flavors: banana, strawberry, choco malt, and coconut. What is the fifth one?
Strawberry.
No.
Are you feeling hot?
Honey, including mocha, Cowbell has 5 flavors: strawberry, banana, choco malt, coconut. What's the fifth one?
Choco malt.
Hey!
Coconut.
Hey!
Nutritious and refreshing, Cowbell has a flavor for everyone.
They think I don't know.
This advert is FD.
Thanks for staying with us. You're watching State of Affairs here on GH1 television. So, last part of our conversation with Madam Mona Kote, the former Deputy Finance Minister, also joining us tonight. So, we've talked largely about the problem. We've talked about things that are not going right. But the Auditor General's report gives us an indication of flagrant abuse of even the little funds that come into the kitty that are meant to help us develop and grow as a country. I mean, just a few readings in the report thus far are startling. SkyTrain project monies have been advanced that we can find $2 million. There's some staff at the Finance Ministry, about 3 of them we've paid over 1 million cedis that we can't even find their personal files and records. What does this show us, and how do we really protect the public purse and stop the rot?
To be honest, Francis, this Auditor General's report that came out, for some people, they think it's fantastic. It's not. It doesn't really tell the full story. It's just skimming on the front, but it's not telling the full story. First and foremost, Auditor General's office was revamped a long time ago so that they are no longer an institution that do postmortem, but that do risk assessment and be able to tell us that for these findings, these are the implications and these are the potential recommendations, and come back to see if you have instituted some of these recommendations. And that's what we were doing before we left office in 2016, at the end of 2016. Today we are seeing similar reports coming out, but not telling the full story. So what you see now, which you've mentioned a few, that even frightens you, is only the tip of the iceberg. If the whole truth of what is actually going on is brought out, and most likely it won't come out under this administration, it will come out under the next administration, then we'll get to know the truth of the matter. So these are just little skirmishes that they are throwing there to show that they are working and so forth, give some implications and some sort of recommendation, return this, return that. But some of us know a lot of stories that are not showing up. Has the public procurement issue, authority issue, has it shown up in any Auditor General's report?
Never have seen.
After Mr. Domer-Level left office? No. Has there been any reprimanding? Has there been any enforcement of the law or policy? Because there were criminal acts. Nothing has happened. So honestly, it doesn't carry much credibility, this Auditor General's report. Yes, it has mentioned some of the things, but the key things that are creating major problems for our economy, it is not those little expenditure that you talked about, but major expenditure that should not take place, that is taking place, are not mentioned in those reports.
Like which ones?
There are many expenditure that, as I mentioned earlier, were showing up below the line. And those expenditure line items must come up so that we know the deficit that we have right up front, but we are not seeing it. Some of them are expenditure items for projects that we are not seeing the projects. They are mentioned all the time, but we don't see the projects. In reality, they are not there. So expenditure line, but with nothing to show for it, but yet the funds are gone.
So let's talk about GHOne for instance.
The funds have been have gone out, but we don't see anything for it. Therefore, it is not contributing to revenue.
Wow.
it is a very precarious situation, and those are some of the things that we need to fix before even the IMF can come and bring money and help to stabilize our fiscal.
Typically, for a situation like this, the legislature should be the best conduit through which these matters are dealt with.
Indeed.
Do you see that effort already happening?
To be honest, Francis, we do have a parliament, but when you watch and you listen to the arguments that go on as things are brought before parliament, we don't see a good debate. We don't see a good enough debate. We see things spoken outside parliament, but we don't see a good enough debate. Let's start from the vetting of ministers. Some of them should never have become ministers.
Like which ones?
Like plenty, and I won't mention names because we don't sit here to embarrass people. But a lot of them should not have become ministers based on the vetting that we watched on public television. And yet they got passed. E-levy, all the argument that went on, yet e-levy was passed. Tell me how many things have come to parliament that we were against that got put away. Very few. Most of them got passed. So in as much as parliamentarians, some may be doing well, making noise, we don't have enough of them who can make enough noise to put
even
down,
for this even split parliament?
Exactly. Having a split parliament should have made it easier for us, because then we can almost say we have parliament and they have executive. But it's not happening. They seem to be getting everything they want. Everything gets passed. Everything gets passed.
What is that down to? Poor leadership?
Well, I think it's down to behavior of individuals rather than even leadership. And of course, the leadership sets the tone. But I think it's also just individuals who are not putting their shoulder to the wheel. So we are only seeing a few of our MPs doing most of the work, and many really just taking a ride in Parliament.
My last question will be on your party, the NDC, and at this moment in time, the reorganization of the party. Do you see the right steps being taken towards the election of a leader for the 2024 elections, both from party structure level and even towards flag bearership?
Definitely. Over the last few months, in fact from last year, we've continued to strengthen the grassroots, and we'll continue to do that, because it's the grassroots who, one, vote the most, and they feel the pain or feel the whatever results come out of good governance, they feel it. What results come out of bad governance, they feel it. So we are strengthening our grassroots. There's no doubt that in this country, we are almost half-half in terms of the two dominant parties. There's no real third force at this point in time, so we focus on the two parties. And for those who like a party, usually they'll be all out for that party, irrespective of the difficulties. But I think we are seeing increasingly people getting more and more on the fence. And therefore, we will be working on those on the fence as well. In as much as we will be telling the story, I think the story is telling itself. Most people are seeing what is going on, and they are discerning, and therefore we just need to continue to keep our constituencies strong, keep the grassroots strong, and let them have some hope to hold on to until election time.
Unfortunately, that's what I'll allow for us tonight. But I thank you for joining us, Madam Mona Kote, former Deputy Finance Minister and Managing Partner of BVM Advisory Services. This was brought to you with the kind of sponsor of MTN. MTN is everywhere you go, and Carbol Milk. Thanks for watching. I'm Francis Aban. Thanks to my production team and to the technical team and my director for the show tonight. Thank you for watching. We're back next week. Keep watching GH1 Television, your best experience. Good night.
GH1 TV, your best experience.
This show is rated 18.
One in 10 men suffer from erectile dysfunction, which tends to affect their self-esteem, relationships, and so much more issues, even sometimes causing anxiety. I am here to tell you that erectile dysfunction has many, many different forms of treatment, from Viagra to surgery, as well as herbal ways to treat it. Joining me today are 3 special guests. I have with me Dr. Ben Weirdu, as well as Nia Mate, who is a dietitian, and Ifwa, a beautician. Welcome to Duvet. Guys, how are we doing tonight?
I'm very well.
Well, you look beautiful, Ifwa.
Thank you. Look beautiful.
Yes, Doc, ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
So I'm going to start with you. What is erectile dysfunction?
So it's defined as the inability to have penile erection or attain or maintain penile erection that is sufficient enough for satisfactory sex. So basically,